Well, hello and welcome. I'm Beth Pike with the State Historical Society of Missouri, and thank you for being here. We are joined by the curator of our art collections, Dr. Joan Stack, who has helped put together a wonderful exhibit on display at Ellis Library on the University of Missouri campus. The exhibit and today's program features 10 African American artists from Missouri during the periods of the 20th and 21st centuries. If you happen to be in Columbia now through May, we invite you to check out the display in the colonnade cases near the main entrance inside Ellis Library. Dr. Stack is a native Missourian. She received her PhD in art history from Washington University in St. Louis, and prior to joining the State Historical Society in 2006, Joan was the curator of European and American art at the University of Missouri's Museum of Art and Archaeology. And for this presentation, Joan has drawn largely from artists whose artwork is in the collection of the State Historical Society of Missouri. A little later in the program, Joan will be joined by Ariana Gonzalez, an anthropology student at the University of Missouri, who has been working as an intern with our art collections at the State Historical Society of Missouri. And Ariana will offer some of her research for today's program. Now, just a couple of quick housekeeping items to mention. At the end of Joan and Ariana's talk, we'll open the program to your questions. At any time, you can enter your question where you see the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer questions in the order received. This program is made possible by members of the State Historical Society of Missouri, and we invite you to join or renew your annual membership to help our efforts to preserve, publish, and share Missouri history to the public. I'll put the link in the chat function below on how you can easily support us. But for right now, let's hear from Dr. Joan Stack.
Yes, well, thank you very much. And I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Today's presentation is celebrating 10 African-American artists from Missouri. And this program is co-sponsored by Mizzou's Black History Month Committee, MU Libraries, and the State Historical Society of Missouri. Because Missouri's African-American artists have created such a rich aesthetic legacy, we can provide only a brief introduction to a few of these extraordinary creators in this talk. At the end of my discussion of 10 artists, my intern, Ariana Gonzalez, will very briefly introduce you to 11 more, so you can look forward to that. Now, the first artist on our list is Arthur Diggs, who was born in Columbia, Missouri in 1888. His father, Harrison Diggs, had been enslaved by MU's third president, William Hudson, and his wife, Albina. Harrison Diggs secured his freedom by serving in the Union Army during the Civil War. And he married Sarah Lawrence in 1867, after the war. Arthur Diggs was the 9th of the couple's 10 surviving children. Arthur was an excellent student at Frederick Douglass School in Columbia, seen here in a photo from 1908. And the young Diggs would go on to publish a number of writings, which we'll get to in a moment, but his first publications appeared in the Columbia Herald's Children Write to Santa Claus page. In 1899, he wrote, quote, "Dear Santa, how kind you were to me last Christmas, and I now wonder if you'll be equally so this year. I will not ask for much, only a drum, lots of candies and nuts. Please remember my older brother and sisters. I was glad to hear of Admiral Dewey's marriage, and I hope he'll be our next president. I am your loving friend, Arthur Diggs." And as an aside, some Americans hoped Admiral Dewey, who had fought in the Spanish-American War, would run for president in 1900, but he withdrew his name from consideration. Arthur Diggs graduated from Douglass in 1906. His speech on the importance of compulsory education was published in the Sedalia Weekly Conservator, one of Missouri's historic Black newspapers. Diggs declared, "Classmates, let us, as we leave the walls of old Fred Douglass School, exalt our education. Now that we have finished the course prescribed by this school, it is only the beginning of what we hope to learn in the future." In 1909, 20-year-old Arthur Diggs married fellow Columbian Gussie Hughes, and the couple moved to Chicago soon after. Arthur enrolled in the School of the Chicago Art Institute, and years later, in a 1931 article, he would praise the institution, writing, "The Chicago Art Institute School and galleries have an open door to all races, unlike the South, where such is closed to Black people." At the galleries of the Art Institute, Digges, who had an affinity for landscape painting, had access to paintings by American tonalists and European Impressionists, such as these works by George Inness at left and Claude Monet at right. Early on, Digges showed a talent for creating evocative landscapes that represented the effects of light and atmosphere on our visual perception of color and form. This untitled piece is in a private collection. And this beautiful winter scene, entitled March Twilight, was recently acquired by the State Historical Society of Missouri. So please come and see it in our gallery on Elm Street. Arthur Digges was an early leader of what is now known as the Chicago Black Renaissance. And in December of 1927, W.E.B. Du Bois discussed him in his magazine, The Crisis. Digges is pictured as a leading member of the Chicago Art League in an article by fellow Art League member, William M. Farrow. Arthur Digges would have his greatest national success in the late 1920s and early 1930s, appearing in several of the traveling Harmon exhibitions of fine art by American Negro artists. This catalog for the 1929 exhibition includes 3 landscapes with titles that reflect Digges' interest in transient and seasonal phenomena: Winter Sunshine, Fleeting Cumulus, and In May. By 1930, Arthur and Gussie Digges had 6 children. Arthur listed his occupation on the census as a shipping clerk at an art gallery. He would list the same job in the censuses of 1940 and 50. Digges remained a part-time painter during these years, still active in the arts community, but with less time for painting and exhibitions. In 1962, Digges' photo appeared in the Chicago Tribune with an earlier self-portrait that was exhibited at the Holy Cross Episcopal Church during the church's annual art fair. Digges would pass away a few years later in 1967. Number 2 on our artist list is Elmer Sims Campbell, who was born in St. Louis in 1906. Campbell lived the first 14 years of his life in St. Louis, but in 1920, his mother began a degree course at the University of Chicago and enrolled her son in Chicago's Inglewood Prep School, which you see here, where he graduated in 1923. Campbell continued his education at the Chicago Art Institute, graduating in 1927 and going back to St. Louis. In around 1930, Campbell moved to New York City and quickly found work. In 1931, he designed the NAACP's Christmas seal, and he began to break into the big time as a magazine illustrator. His first cover was the 1931 Christmas issue of the humor magazine Judge. He was only 26 years old. In 1932, Campbell designed the now famous nightclub map of Harlem that you see here. A great lover of jazz, he was a personal friend of Cab Calloway, who performed at the Cotton Club. Campbell got another big break when he became an artist for Esquire magazine, which debuted in 1933. Here is a cartoon from that first issue by Campbell. The caption reads, "You could at least take your hat off when you're talking to a lady." Campbell was clearly a master of tone, light, and shadow, as well as gestural line. His cartoons and illustrations would appear in almost every issue of Esquire magazine until the late 1950s. He was particularly known for his imagery of pretty women and often risque illustrations and cartoons. He also created the magazine's mascot, Esky, which is still used today. In 1940, he became even more successful with his panel cartoon, Cuties, which was distributed nationwide by King Features to over 100 newspapers. These cartoons were so popular, they were even collected in book form. While most of Campbell's magazine illustrations represented white people, his images of African Americans also appeared in Esquire. And here you see two watercolors from the 1930s. He had a wonderful atmospheric color sense, and they're beautiful watercolors. And you could see that in these images from Esquire, as well as this 1934 New Yorker cover that Campbell did, which is in the collection of SHSMO, not the original painting, but the cover. The SHSMO collection also includes this 1934 copy of the Esquire pictorial Homeland of Happy Feet, which documents dance innovations at the Harlem nightclubs, as well as the dances of children on the Harlem streets. By the 1950s, Campbell was a celebrity. Here he appears in a 1951 Blatz beer ad and in a brilliantly simple self-portrait. Campbell continually encouraged young artists of color, lecturing and inviting them to his New York studio. In 1936, he founded a prize for the Urban League of St. Louis to support Black artists during the League's annual art exhibitions. He named the award after his mother, who always encouraged her son to follow his dream of becoming an artist. Campbell remembered his St. Louis days in an illustrated poem, St. Louis Blues, published in Esquire in 1957. In it, the 51-year-old artist talks about his memories of St. Louis. Quote, a ragtime piece with a raggedy bass, bustin' 2/4 time in a back saloon. Off Chestnut and Market, the place to be. That's old St. Louis coming back to me. Campbell passed away in White Plains, New York in 1971 at the age of 65. And here is the St. Louis Post-Dispatch's obituary for the artist. Now, moving on, remember the Artist Prize funded by E. Sims Campbell at the St. Louis's Urban League annual show? This is the first winner of that prize, Jessie May Housley, later Holloman, who was born in St. Louis in 1905. Jessie attended Sumner High School and showed great promise as an artist, studying with Frederick C. Alston and graduating in 1925 with a specialist degree in fine art. After graduation, she attended the Chicago Art Institute for 3 years and went on to study at the Art Students League in New York in 1931. She would eventually become an art teacher at Duval Elementary School, which you see here, in which she worked there for over 30 years. In 1936, Housley won the Urban League's Negro Exhibition's first grand prize, endowed by fellow artist E. Sims Campbell, for her drawing Left-Handed Ironer, seen here. This drawing is a graphic tour de force that reflects Housley's interest in representing the lives of everyday working people. Jessie's artwork at the exhibition received national attention. She was given a 2-page spread showcasing the works in the magazine Opportunity, a journal of Negro life, in March of 1936. In 1940, Housley received a coveted commission to paint a large fresco mural for the offices of the St. Louis Urban League. The fresco represented interracial cooperation between labor and industry, as a European-American businessman shakes the hand of an African-American worker under St. Louis's Eads Bridge. Now, sadly, the building where the mural was housed was destroyed in the 1960s. But Jessie Housley's success at the Urban League led to the commission of a mural in the lobby of St. Louis's new Masonic Temple in 1941. And this fresco is often described as Housley's masterpiece. The Origins of Freemasonry survives in the temple, which has recently been converted into luxury apartments, known as B on Lindell. The fresco depicts the Freemasons' traditional origin story, by which the craft of masonry begins with Euclid in Egypt, together with the biblical figures of Jabal and Lamech. According to the Masons, this knowledge was passed on to the children of Israel, who brought it to Europe during the early Middle Ages. The newly built Masonic temple and mural were dedicated on October 1st, 1941. Missouri Senator Harry Truman, a Masonic leader in Missouri, gave the dedicatory address. Jessie remained single until 1963, when she married Herman Holloman. She continued teaching and remained active in the St. Louis arts community. She died in St. Louis in 1984 and was buried in Washington Park Cemetery. Our fourth artist today is Spencer Thornton Banks, who was born in Clarksdale, Mississippi in 1912, but moved to St. Louis at the age of 14. Like Jesse Housley, Banks graduated from Sumner High School in St. Louis, where he studied with the school's influential art teacher, Frederick C. Alston. Banks went on to study art at nearby Webster College. After graduation, Banks began to make a name for himself as a commercial and fine artist. He won prizes at a number of the Urban League exhibitions. In 1939, his work was exhibited at the St. Louis Art Museum. Here, Banks is shown amongst the Urban League winners with his painting Saturday Night Jam Session, which unfortunately is almost impossible to see in this newspaper photo. But you can get a glimpse of Banks's style during this period in this undated wash drawing, Farm in a Thunderstorm, from a private collection. Banks often lent his skills to the betterment of his community. In 1937, the young artist designed the centerfold for the dedicatory program of the Homer G. Phillips Hospital, one of the largest Black hospitals in the United States. On the right side of the picture, Banks pictures the type of person and families who stood to benefit from the hospital. Banks was also an innovator in the development of comic strips, the comic strips Poogie and Pokinia, for the African-American newspaper, The Argus. Poogie followed the adventures of a dog by that name, and Pokinia was the name of the title character of the first comic strip to feature a Black woman as its heroine. In those years, Banks was a successful commercial artist, and here you see two original works by him in the SHSMO collections, both studies for commercial signs he created for St. Louis pharmacies. During World War II, in 1943, Banks joined the U.S. Navy Reserves and remained in the forces until 1946. He was stationed at the Naval Air Station in Lampert Field. During that time, he presented a one-man show at the New People's Art Center in St. Louis. After leaving the armed services, Banks became an art instructor at Washington Tech School in St. Louis. He also set up a business in hopes of serving his community and providing work to veteran artists. And here you see a 1951 article about that business, as well as an ad for his veteran sign and art shop in the Argus. As the years rolled by, Banks continued to lend his artistic talents to various causes, even into his retirement years. In 1980, he made this poster to promote a fundraising banquet to help raise funds to reopen Homer G. Phillips Hospital. The older Spencer Banks quotes the image of the Black family that first appeared in the 1937 program as an element of his 1980 poster. And finally, here is an article about the older Banks, published in the St. Louis Globe-Democrat just months before the artist passed away in 1983. Banks is shown in his studio surrounded by his artwork. Spencer T. Banks and his wife Sarah Jane are buried in Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in St. Louis. Our fifth artist today is Edward Joseph Dwight, known as Ed Dwight, who was born in Kansas City, Kansas in 1933. Although his childhood home was across the border in Kansas, he lived, studied, and worked in both Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri throughout his Kansas City years. Dwight was the son of Edward Joseph Dwight Sr., known as Eddie Dwight. The elder Dwight was a well-known baseball player who played with the famed Kansas City Monarchs, whose jersey, and you can see Eddie Dwight's jersey here, which is now in the Smithsonian Museum of American History. The young Ed Dwight showed promise in both art and science in high school. He received an engineering degree from Kansas City Junior College in Missouri in 1953 and enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. He was stationed in Arizona, and while in the service, he rose to the rank of captain and earned a degree in aeronautical engineering from Arizona State University. In 1961, John Kennedy was promoting the U.S. space program and supporting the growing movement for civil rights. In consultation with his brother, Attorney General Robert Kennedy, the president advocated including African Americans in the nascent astronaut training program. Ed Dwight's experience, education, and skills made him an ideal candidate, and he became the first African American to participate in the nation's astronaut training program. He became a hero in the African American community, appearing on the cover of several magazines. And here you see him on the covers of Sepia and Jet in 1963. But the trajectory of Dwight's career changed in November of 1963, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. The new administration was less interested in Dwight. His astronaut career stalled, and as this article in a June 1965 issue of Ebony suggests, his astronaut career stalled because of racism and fear of pushback from certain segments of the government. By the end of 1966, Dwight had left the program. After leaving the armed forces, Dwight decided to make a career change, exploring his lifelong interest in art. He moved to Colorado and earned an MFA in sculpture from the University of Denver in 1977. Dwight has since found national success for his fine art sculpture and created over 100 public memorials. And here you see just a few of them. Right here in Missouri, we have one of Dwight's masterpieces, the Soldiers Memorial at the historic Black University Lincoln in Jefferson City. The base informs us that the monument is, quote, dedicated to the officers and soldiers of the 62nd and 65th United States Colored Infantries. These Civil War soldiers of Missouri donated some of their salaries to help found Lincoln University. Dwight activates the space, visualizing the soldiers marching towards the monument and helping their comrades onto the platform. The sculpture extends beyond the space of the pedestal, as the soldiers appear to be out in the common space of Lincoln University, among the faculty and students. The monument, dedicated in 2007, was the first memorial erected to honor Black Union soldiers in a former slave state. Now in his 90s, Ed Dwight's studio and foundry, founded in 1980, continues to operate in Denver, Colorado. Number 6 on our list is Essex Garner, who was born in Kansas City, Missouri in 1961. He attended Central High School in Kansas City, graduating in 1978. Garner had an early interest in art and was an intern at Hallmark Cards from 1974 to 1976. He was also involved with the Fellowship Art Research Center in Kansas City at this time. In 1978, he joined the Armed Forces, where he became a platoon sergeant and military artist. He served his country until his retirement in 2003, spending the last 20 years with the Missouri National Guard. During the 1980s, he also worked as an artist, creating a number of public artworks and murals around Kansas City. Garner moved to Jefferson City in the 1990s and married Larna Neal in 1999. He enrolled in the art program at Lincoln University, and here are some images associated with those years at Lincoln, including his family photo, a session with a 1901 camera. After earning his bachelor's degree, he enrolled in the master's program in education at the University of Missouri in Columbia. It was during this period that he became especially interested in using art to better understand history. Between 2011 and 2012, a period that marked the 150th anniversary of the American Civil War, Garner created a series of images dealing with the history of African Americans who served in the Union Army during the war. He called the series Learning to Read, A Soldier's Story, since it was in the Army that many African Americans learned that skill. Having served in the military himself, Garner had a special affinity with these soldiers. He purchased a reenactor's Union uniform and often served as his own model. The paintings were part of his master's project, and Garner earned his M.Ed. from Mizzou in 2012. One of the watercolors, Things That Make You Go, visualizes Civil War soldiers seeing themselves memorialized in Ed White's Soldier Memorial sculpture. Garner joined the art faculty of Lincoln University and continued to explore Black history through his art. During the last decade, he has been working on a series based on the Buffalo Soldiers of the post-war West. He works with a group of reenactors out of Kansas City to create accurate images of these soldiers. And sometimes he joins these reenactors in their reenactments. In 2021, I wrote an article about Essex for Missouri Life magazine entitled Making the Past Present, which explores Garner's interest in creating art that investigates our relationship with the past on an aesthetic and experiential level. Garner is still teaching at Lincoln University, and in 2023, he created a monumental oil painting that recalled the theme of that painting he had done a decade earlier. This painting is called The Colored Boys and visualizes the Civil War troops that helped found Lincoln, confronting their legacy as they interact with the Ed Dwight Memorial. The painting is currently on display at Lincoln. Our seventh artist is Manuel Hughes, who was born in Forest City, Arkansas in 1938. As a youth, he moved to St. Louis, Missouri, where he attended Sumner High School. You will notice from his senior yearbook photo that he was student council president and a member of the National Honor Society. Apparently, in 1958, he was planning to become an architectural engineer. In 1959, he moved to Columbia to attend Mizzou and decided to major in art. He received a BA in 1963, and in 1965, he became the first African American to earn an MA in visual arts at Mizzou. After graduation, he taught college art classes in St. Louis and frequently exhibited his work in the city. Here he is shown in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch exhibiting his work at Laclede Town Gallery. In 1976, he moved to New York City, where he began a 30-year career as a professor at Pratt Institute. He immediately began to show his work in the city, and his abstraction Group 1 from 1970 was purchased by the Whitney Museum of Art. Hughes began traveling frequently to Paris, and he later made France his part-time home. In the 1990s, he did a series of still lifes featuring old French toys, and this exhibit was shown in St. Louis. Hughes also did a series of artworks exploring the aesthetic nature of tools. And at the top left, you see a lithograph entitled Untitled Drill Braces. And this is in our Ellis Library show on loan from an anonymous lender. More recently, Hughes has continued to create still lifes, but now the old objects, toys, dolls, and doll parts evoke histories of and memories of racial pain and violence. Today, Hughes is now in his 80s. He divides his time between New York and Paris, although he continually exhibits periodically in St. Louis. Our eighth artist today is Byron Smith, who was born in Columbia, Missouri in 1960. Byron attended Columbia Public Schools and graduated from Rockbridge High School in 1979. And here you see a detail from his 1989 self-portrait serigraph. The color shows clearly in the calf. The photo is based on a yearbook image from the artist's days at Jefferson Junior High School in Columbia. Smith attended Mizzou in the 1980s, during which time he created this gestural lithograph representing MU's Memorial Union. He also became active in the local arts community, showing his artwork at various galleries and often winning prizes in art shows. Smith works in a figural style in a variety of media. Here you see an early etching entitled Michael, as well as a self-portrait from 2013. He is interested in the communicative power of the human form and often works directly from life models. His landscapes capture the emotional energy and memory-provoking qualities of the land, water, and sky. Often the sites Smith paints relate to his own personal and family histories. Smith's 1998 painting, Pear Trees in Memory of Ali Bass, is particularly powerful. It was painted on his family's farmland, where one of his ancestors planted pear trees to honor his children who were born free. This painting is now in the collection of the State Historical Society of Missouri. Smith is also an arts entrepreneur, operating Mythmaker Gallery in downtown Columbia, co-owned with Debbie Ness, from 1993 to 1998. And here you see Byron and Debbie in the gallery. He was also co-owner with Jeffrey Moore, Frank Stack, and Robert Friedman of Grindstone Lithography Studios in the 2010s. And at right, you see one of Byron's lithos representing an old MKT train car. He joined the community of artists at Ora Street Studio in 2007 and is on the advisory board of Mizzou's Museum of Art and Archaeology. Our ninth artist is the youngest on our list, Simon Tatum, who was born in Georgetown on Grand Cayman Island in 1995. In 2014, he received the Cayman Islands Visual Arts and Design Scholarship from Deutsche Bank and the National Gallery of the Cayman Islands to study art at the University of Missouri. And here you see him profiled in the Columbia Daily Tribune. And Tatum was featured on the MU website in 2017. While at Mizzou, he began working on sculptural mixed media works called memory tanks. The tanks hold fragments of ceramic portrait busts, artificial flowers, and other things suspended in water. The shape of the tanks resembles traditional Cayman Island gravestones, and Tatum sees them as reminders of lost people and lost heritages. In 2023, these tanks, which he created at MU, were exhibited at the National Gallery of the Cayman Islands. After graduating from Mizzou, Tatum entered the graduate program at Kent State University in Ohio, receiving his MFA in 2021. A Waiting Boat, the ink on acetate artwork in the collection of SHSMO, is linked to a series of artworks that Tatum created based on old colonialist photographs that Tatum found in the Cayman Islands National Archive. Like much of Tatum's work, it explores cultural politics and the concept of reclaiming regional identity from imperialistic contexts. Since graduating from Mizzou, Tatum's artwork has been shown at many venues, including galleries in London, Leipzig, and the Cayman Islands. He maintains his ties to Mizzou as an alumni board member for MU's School of Visual Studies. And the 10th and final artist on our list is Nick Cave, who was born in Fulton, Missouri, and grew up in Fulton and Columbia, Missouri. Known as Nicky Cave when he lived in Columbia, Cave attended Grant Elementary School, seen here, Jefferson Junior High School, and Hickman High School. His first mention in the Columbia papers came in 1972, when he was awarded the Missouri State Teachers Association Reading Circle Award at Grant School. By my calculations, Nick Cave was a 6th grader that year. In 1972, I was also a student at Grant in the 1st grade, an early brush with greatness. Here are Nick Cave's junior and senior photographs from Hickman High School here in Columbia, the yearbooks from 1977 and 1978. And here we see Cave exhibiting his artistic talents early, painting a papier-mâché head for the Hickman Kewpie mascot in 1977, and participating in a fashion show, perhaps showing off some early creations in 1978. Nick Cave went on to the Kansas City Art Institute in 1978 and graduated with a degree in fibers in 1982. Nick Cave's brother Jack, or Jackie Cave, also graduated from the Kansas City Art Institute, and the two held a fashion show at the Institute in 1982, and the Columbia Daily Tribune reported on the event. Today, Jack Cave is also an artist and designer who lives in Chicago. After graduation, Nick, still known as Nicky, lived for several years in Kansas City. In this 1987 Kansas City Star story, he is interviewed about his work on display at Crown Center. His imaginative outfits from shredded denim have elements that foreshadow his later artwork. Cave is known for creating artwork that blurs the line between sculpture, costume, and theater. Here you see works displayed in the 2023 retrospective of his work at the Guggenheim Museum in New York. Since 1992, Cave has created hundreds of mixed media wearable sculptural garments he calls sound suits. These outfits are usually displayed on mannequins in museums, but they are also sometimes worn in performance. Cave sound suits are now displayed in museums throughout the world. And Cave has also created numerous performance pieces, and here his horses invade the Grand Central Station Terminal in New York City. Cave also creates wonderful installations, walk-through spaces, and many, many sculptures. And between 2021 and 2023, New York City unveiled over 100 feet of mosaics Cave designed for New York subway stations at Bryant Park and Times Square. Here, Nick Cave talks to a CBS reporter, Vladimir Duthiers, about the newly installed mosaics. The imagery comes from his Soundsuit series, and it captures all the vibrancy and joy of these creations. There's even a video component, so viewers can see the sound suits in motion. Cave's designs incorporate different shaped tiles to enliven the surface. Some tiles are ceramic with matte finish, while others are shining glass with various levels of translucidity. The inlaid patterns emphasize the body and its movements. One of my favorite details are these sections of tile, hand-painted to look like buttons that cover the feet and legs of one of the figures. Millions of residents and visitors to New York City will view these creations by this Missouri artist. Nick Cave has come a long way from Columbia Hickman High School. And with that, we have explored the history and legacies of 10 Missouri Black artists. But there's so many other artists we could have discussed. And my intern this semester, Ariana Gonzalez, has made a handout listing many more Missouri artists for further study. She has also prepared the next few slides to introduce you very briefly to 11 additional artists from her list.
Okay, so my first artist that I chose was Frederick Cornelius Austin, who was born in North Carolina in 1895. He moved to Missouri in 1929, but was educated at Pennsylvania School of Industrial Arts and Shaw University. He later became the art director of Sumner High School in St. Louis, where he taught Jesse Housley, E. Sims Campbell, and Spencer T. Banks, as mentioned by Dr. Stack before. On the left, you see his painting, Light of the World, dated 1929, and on the lower right, you see The Herb Doctor, which appeared in the 1931 Harmon exhibit of art by American Negro artists. My second artist is Doris Bradley.
Get it? Are you able to click it? Can you not get it to change?
That's
There, I got it to change.
She was born in St. Louis in 1926, and she graduated from the Kansas City Art Institute in 1951. And soon after, she acquired a teaching certificate from Harris Stowe State College, and she became a teacher at Hempstead Elementary School. She worked with a variety of media, including painting, drawing, and sculpture, as you see here. My third artist is William L. Fambreau Sr., who was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1916. He was educated at Lincoln University for graphic arts and enlisted in the U.S. Air Force during the Second World War. Later, Fambreau became a freelance photographer who also worked on the staff at the Kansas City Call. He was known as One-Shot Fambreau because of his preferred style of taking only a single shot of his subjects. On the top left, you see the photo joining the Union, and on the lower right, you see his photo, Jazz Band Teddy. The fourth artist is Leonard Pryor, who was born in Kansas in 1924. He served as a pharmacist in the U.S. Naval Corps during World War II. And after the war, he became the first Black student to enroll at the Kansas City Art Institute. During the late 40s and 50s, he befriended Thomas Hart Benton and worked with the famed painter in Benton's home studio. Pryor became the first African-American dean at the KCAI in 1968 and later coordinated art and music education for the Kansas City Public Schools until his retirement in 1986. Now, going from left to right, you see his painting Elsie Mountain, North End, and Lonesome, and you can kind of see Benton's influences in the two right-hand paintings. All three pictures are a collection at the Nelson Museum in Kansas City. The fifth artist is Gladys W. Renwick, who was born in St. Louis in 1904. After graduating Sumner High School in St. Louis, she attended the Chicago School of Fine Arts. Renwick stopped painting for 20 years after marrying, but returned to the practice after her children were grown. She exhibited her work in a solo exhibition in 1950 at the University of Illinois and participated in a 10th annual show for Negro artists at Atlanta University. At the center, you can see her sat at her desk working as the Assistant Director of Food Services at Lincoln University in Oxford, Pennsylvania. Frank Logan was born in Missouri in 1911, and he earned his BA at Lincoln University and M.Ed at University of Missouri in industrial education. Logan taught visual art and industrial arts at Douglas High School and Lincoln University. He specialized in oil painting and won third prize for this category at the Atlanta University annual exhibit of paintings, sculptures, and prints by Negro artists in 1945. He made several religious paintings for the Fifth Street Christian Church in Columbia, as you can see in a little picture down below. And the pictures on the right are some of the paintings in that church. And on the left is called The Farm Scene, which is an oil painting from a private collection. The seventh artist is Leroy Allen, who was born in 1951 in Kansas and graduated from the University of Kansas with a bachelor's degree in design in 1977. Allen started working at Hallmark Cards in Kansas City, Missouri in 1980, where he became the technical supervisor. And during that time, he helped found a group of 6 local Black artists dubbed the Kansas City Six, who supported and encouraged each other's artistic endeavors. He later became one of the 22 members of another local Black artist group called The Light in the Other Room. And at the center, you see his artwork, Winds of Change, presenting a Kansas City Monarchs baseball player. And on the right, you see his painting, Morning Mist. The eighth artist is Ali Halani, who was born in Somalia in 1955 and moved to the United States in 1984. He obtained a BS art degree from Lincoln University and a master's in fine arts at the University of Missouri-Columbia in 1994. Halani won numerous awards for his pieces, and his work has been exhibited throughout Missouri and Kansas. For many years, he taught at Lincoln University and then later the State Fair Community College in Sedalia, Missouri, where he still lives. Here you can see several examples of his paintings in three-dimensional sculptures and ceramics. Daniel J. Fry was born in 1955 in Pennsylvania. He earned his PhD in education from Syracuse University in 1991. Following graduation, he served as a professor of art and education at Mizzou in the 1990s and won the Junior Faculty Award for Excellence in Teaching in 1993. Fry wrote African American Visual Artists, an annotated bibliography of educational resource materials in 2001. He taught art at California State University until his death in 2014. And here you see some examples of his three-dimensional work. The 10th artist is Adrienne W. Horde, who was born in Jefferson City in 1949. She earned her Master's of Fine Arts at the University of Michigan and her PhD from the University of Illinois. She served on the faculty at the University of Missouri from 1988 to 2013. She then joined the faculty at the University of Missouri in Kansas City and retired in 2019. She still continues to live and work in the Kansas City area, and here you can see two examples of her paintings. And our last but not least artist is Kenny Green, or Kenneth Green, born in 1950, and he was educated at the University of Missouri and Columbia College. Green is the owner of Monarch Jewelry in Columbia and a former professor of art at the Columbia College. He has received numerous honors and awards for his artwork and service to the community. At the bottom right, you can see some examples of Green's jewelry, and at the top center, an image of his watercolor painting, Head into the River.
And with that, we conclude our discussion of African American artists in Missouri. And I will hand it back over to Beth to field questions.
Absolutely. What a wonderful presentation, both of you. I know I learned so much more after your program. First question does come from Carol, who asked, does the exhibit at Ellis include works by all the artists featured today?
It just includes the first 10. I mean, but Ariana has prepared a handout, which includes the other 11 that we discussed, plus more. I think there's almost 40 artists, 30 to 40 artists on her list. So you can pick that up at the exhibit.
And Helen asked, do you know if there were restrictions or prohibitions related to African-American male artists depicting Caucasian women, especially in more provocative poses and clothing? And she thanks you for this interesting program.
Well, it certainly didn't stop E. Sims Campbell. No, I don't think there were officially any such things. However, there would, of course, be customs, and it could be a problem, especially in southern states or states where segregation was particularly strong. E. Sims Campbell was, of course, living in New York City, and so he was able to do the cuties and all his sort of risque Esquire pictures, and actually became famous for it. I'm not sure how many people knew he was African American.
Someone else wanted to know about, are there hours for the exhibit at Ellis? And I know it's just open when the library is open, and
that's right.
My daughter is on campus and she studies there at night. So I think you can even walk in the evenings. I think they open actually till midnight. So I think there's plenty of opportunity from probably 8 o'clock, probably till midnight to go on into the library and see it. It's in a more of a public area when you walk in. Lisa Higgins, our friend Lisa over at the university, right there by Ellis. She said, love this presentation and thanking the presenters. She said, you may already know of Daniel Giles, a contemporary artist who grew up here in Columbia. Would you like to say anything about him?
One of the things that was a problem, of course, was especially with contemporary artists. There are just so many, and we're not trying to claim that we have covered all of them. And of course, Daniel Giles, but many others. So, we were just wanting to introduce you, especially to some of the early ones, maybe some people you hadn't heard of. Also, like, celebrate an artist like Campbell, who was like a superstar and very few people know about him. So we did do a few contemporary artists, but again, we kind of focused on both. I guess we did Simon Tatum because we have a work by him in our collection, and we did Nick Cave because he is just such a big star. but we really couldn't cover everybody, and you know, there's so many, and of course it was harder in the old days, and but we wanted to show some of those artists as well.
Is there any kind of handouts even at the exhibit, Joan? I know I was there yesterday.
Yeah, I think we're waiting to the end of February because the handout stand is being used. But as soon as that is available, which will be later this week, we are going to put Ariana's handout will be available. Now, it doesn't include the 10 artists in the exhibit, but people can see those if they go visit the exhibit. But it includes the list of some of the artists that Ariana talked about, plus, as I said, many more that she was able to do some research in. And we're especially looking at some of the older artists that maybe people are not aware of, and not so many contemporary artists.
And Sharon was asking about, or excuse me, it was Joanne, noticed that we had fewer women featured in this talk. So she wanted to know, does that reflect differences in women's success in this field?
Well, I think in my portion, I only had one. And so Ariana really wanted to make sure we covered a few more, and we did in her portion. Now, of course, again, since I was starting way back in the beginning of the 20th century, it was tough for women then too. And one of the things that was really interesting in one of E. Sims Campbell's things that he wrote, a few articles. And at one point he says, what I know is true, it's not that art wasn't being created and that art wasn't in the homes of Black people, and that women artists were creating wonderful things, especially also in media that we might not consider traditional fine art, but like quilting and making clothes and all those things. It's wonderful how Nick Cave has sort of blurred those lines, but a lot of them just didn't get the opportunity to exhibit, the opportunity to show, the opportunity to have an advanced education, get those letters behind their names. And so, you know, a lot of times they're known in their communities, but not so much outside of that, or they're known in their families. And that's just unfortunately one of the problems with history. It's that we only see a small portion of those people who created all kinds of wonderful things. And that's all. So many artists have probably been lost throughout the years, and it's sad to think about that.
But I was just thinking, just adding on to that, I just think there is some barriers when you look at even education training where they could go to study art, and back in the days when there was segregation. So I don't know if that was something that you would obviously say played a part of that as well.
Well, and sexism, of course, was pretty bad too. And you'll notice that most of these artists, especially in this early period, very few of them, E. Sims Campbell, perhaps an exception, were able to make a living at their art. They always had to have that second job. And, you know, I think it's really sad about Diggs, because he, even though he was in Chicago, it was better maybe than in the South, as he says, but there was still racism that was holding him back, and he was having trouble finding places that would exhibit his work. And this is just an unfortunate aspect of our history, of that legacy of racism and white supremacy. And of course, for women got the double whammy because they had to deal with sexism as well. So it was tough.
Yeah, Ariana, I think you were getting ready to say something as well about this.
Yes, I just want to jump in because, as Joan mentioned, I noticed that we didn't have a lot of female artists in our list. And so I did try to add a few more for the presentation. And there are definitely more on the handout as well. But as Joan also said, like, many of these artists could not just support themselves off of their art and their creativity. And a lot of, especially the women that I've like did research on, often just went into teaching, and they were a teacher, and they kind of have to give up that effort and that creativity in order to like support their lives and their families.
Barbara asked, what criteria did you use in selecting the 10 artists?
Well, what I was looking for was, first of all, did we have an original work of these artists? And most of them we did not. There were some exceptions to that. We did have an original by Emanuel Hughes. We had an original by Simon Tatum. We had some originals by Banks. So we included those. Then we also, with E.C. Sims Campbell, we had original printings of some of the magazines. So we were able to show those. So that was one criteria. So did we have something original to show? We did include a few that we didn't. For instance, the sculptor Ed Dwight. Ed Dwight was such a good story. I just, it was so kind of dramatic with the him almost being the first African-American astronaut. Jessie Housley, she was a woman artist in that early period who actually did have a fair amount of success. So I really wanted to include her. So that was one thing. I wanted to get a woman in there. And so we put her in. We recently got an artwork by Diggs. So he was in. And also I was thinking about artists who were right from this area that we live in, which is here in Columbia, Missouri. So Diggs was born in Columbia, Missouri, and so was Byron Smith. And though not born in Columbia, grew up in Columbia with Nick Cave. So that gave them a little boost in choosing them for the exhibition. So it was a combination of things. I also wanted a wide variety of time periods. So starting as early as Diggs was great because he was so early, and being able to go all the way to the contemporary period. So having kind of a wide variety of different types of artists, etc.
Something I noticed when I went by the exhibit yesterday, there were three, maybe four artists that were all graduates of Sumner High School in St. Louis. So I wondered, was there a particular, emphasis with art there, or a teacher that was so inspiring to produce such outstanding artists? I just wondered if you or Ariana kind of looked into that, but I did notice that to be the case.
Yeah, well, Ariana did look into it. Do you want to say a few words about Frederick Alston?
Yeah, so well, Alston was an artist himself, but he taught at Sumner, and he eventually, I think, he was like the art director there for a while as well. And he influenced some of the artists that Dr. Stack discussed and presented on and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and even Emanuel Hughes went to Sumner after the period that Alston had finished, but I think it was a particularly good high school. I mean, I don't know how it compared with some of the other high schools in St. Louis, but I think it was a good high school, and seems to have not only been good in art, but in other forms of education.
Absolutely. Well, it does look like we're about out of time, and I want to thank you, Joan, Ariano, and our audience for your questions and sharing your time with us. Again, this program will be online along with our other virtual programs, which you can find by going to shsmo.org/on-demand. And I also put that in the chat function there for you. Now, our next virtual talk is happening April 11th at 11 a.m. Central, and will feature author and historian Greg Olson, who will discuss the Indigenous presence in Missouri with a program titled Points, Pots, Pipes, and Powwows. You can register for this program at shsmo.org, and we will see you next time. Have a great day, everyone.